episode of the RCC show presented by UVAP. I'm your host, Priyanka, and today we have someone who is very, very established in the field of music, Sai Ganesh Nagpal. He's an accomplished musician, educator, Vedic astrologer, and holistic counselor. And he is recognized for his soulful contribution to the world of spiritual music and Vedic studies, as well as the philosophy. His soulful music performance of the bhajans, kirtans, and meditative mantra recitations, and his profound talks on Hindu philosophy have been very generously appreciated by the audience around the world. So thank you so much, Mr. Sai, for joining us today, and welcome on our show. First of all, please share your journey with the audience. How did you start off in this field? What were your motivation? What were your inspiration?
Sure. So first of all, I'd like to thank you so much for having me on your program. It's a great honor to be here. My journey with the musical arts began when I was very little. So I started learning when I was, I think, 4 or 5 years old. So I began training in Indian classical music at that time. And it was about 10 years ago that I established my label called the Serene Swan Mystical Arts. Under that label, I have been offering musical experiences and other holistic offerings around the world for the past decade or so. When I was little, I was immersed in music a lot, even through my growing up years. So I used to give a lot of musical programs, performances in different places, and finally, it became a major part of my life when I set up the Serene Swan Arts.
Very nice, very nice. Can you tell us what's the genre and type of music that you perform and work with, and especially talk about some of the musical offerings that you have?
Sure. So when I began my musical training, it was in Hindustani classical music. So I did many years of study, first actually in Carnatic music, then in Hindustani music, and so that is a very big part of the offerings that I have musically. That is intrinsically part of the musical presentations and performances that I give. There's a lot of focus in my performances on Bhakti Sangeet. So I offer devotional musical performances, and I have offered these now all over the world, I think almost in every continent of the world. And I find that irrespective of ethnicity, nationality, background, it is always very beautifully appreciated. These musical experiences end up being extremely enriching. Also, one of the areas that I have been working in is the area of Sanskrit mantra recitations and Vedic chanting. This is also an area which is gaining popularity across the world as a way of finding greater peace within. So, group sessions, individual sessions where we chant together and lead into meditations and yoga sessions. This is also a beautiful area of musical offering that I have been involved with for some time. And then I also have a YouTube channel where I share my musical compositions, recordings, etc. And I've also offered musical productions for art films as well. These are some of the areas that I've been working with.
Very, very nice. In fact, I'm sure the audience who are listening right now, so they would be interested in some of these offerings, because as you mentioned that music is an excellent tool of sometimes getting into a meditative state as well. So please talk a little bit more about it, on how music can help us with the overall well-being of our mind and bodies.
Definitely. So I think when we think about music, actually, I think each one of us, irrespective of where we are from, has been influenced in some way by music, because it has a way of going straight to the emotional layer of our being, straight to the mind. Irrespective of which genre of music we listen to, we're always impacted or influenced by a piece of music, whether it is an instant attraction to it, or even sometimes a repulsion to that music. But irrespective, there will always be a connection. And the ancient cultures always um, recognized this powerful connection that we have with musicality, Because if you look at all of the ancient texts, whether it is the Vedas or even the Bhagavad Gita as an example, they all have some kind of a musical intonation. They are meant to be sung, and you'll always find that there is a very specific way in which they are sung. So even though there are commentaries on them, it keeps going back to how is it chanted, how is it sung, and that is a very unique experience. So there are many ways in which, through music, we have access to some of these ancient tools, ancient knowledge and wisdom as well, that we are able to bring into our own experience through various kinds of musical sessions. Um, in the yogic texts, in fact, there is this beautiful description which says that the voice is like Devi or Shakti, and the breath is like Shiva. And when the two come together, there is the creation of powerful sound. And through this kind of sound, through this kind of music, there are so many different qualities that we are able to invoke. In fact, even those who are familiar with the raga system in classical music will know that there are ragas for every kind of mood, every kind of experience as well. And just a different combination of notes, and you can have a completely different flavor that the music can create. So there is a very profound kind of a I'd say structure to these musical practices, and the music, the classical music area is also, so the field of classical music is also referred to as Gandharva Veda music, because it has its origins in the Vedas. So it has within it the potential to help us recognize or come in contact with a greater experience. So every time we come out of a session of, say, chanting or devotional music or even just musical practice, there's always this experience of, I feel more peaceful at the end of it. People will say, I feel connected to something larger. I feel like I'm feeling calm inside. I'm feeling more serene inside. These are all qualities actually of a sort of a greater presence that we are able to come in contact with through music. So it is, I feel it is a very a powerful tool that we have been given, and there are various aspects that we can invoke through musicality. But even in, I would say, in mainstream yoga practice, there is a lot of use of, especially musically recited mantras, in being able to help us find a meditative state much deeper, much faster, and in a much more meaningful way. So I feel like there are, a lot of different areas where we're able to take music and we're able to actually enrich our experience of life through it as well.
Very nice, and indeed very powerful as well, because it does ignite a lot of curiosity to understand more about this subject. And I was reading through one research paper, and it spoke about rag chikitsa. At that time, I had heard of this word first time. I'm
Yeah.
sure in your experience you would have seen how music benefits in different type of ailments or in different type of diseases as well. If you
Yeah.
could talk a little bit from your experience on what have you seen as the impact on people, either on the physical level or on the mental level, when they got introduced to music.
Sure. So the system of, I'd say, the ragas, of course, deal with different qualities that we want to invoke. When we look at the system of mantra yoga, which is very specifically connected to the physiology, there are actually different sounds which are like bija mantras, seed mantras, which are related in the texts to different parts of the physiology. Um, in a lot of the work that I do, I have offered mantra recitations and mantra experiences to individuals and groups. And I think uniformly across, whether it is, wherever it has been in the world, there has always been the one experience is common through it all, that it helps us settle. Yeah, it helps go a little to a quieter place inside. And so much of our attention during the day is on the external world. The mantra and the musicality of it immediately allows us to go a little bit deeper. And if someone asks a person to close their eyes and just meditate just like that without any kind of guidance, it is a little bit difficult, because so many different kinds of thoughts end up flooding the mind. With music and with mantra, especially the power of musical sound, it's like we have been given this great tool to be able to transcend. So we go into a deeper layer, and we're able to, um, first of all, on a more basic level, we're able to relax different parts of the physiology. So there's a great quality of, if you want to call it, de-stressing, or just being able to even let go of some of the anxieties we feel, which we accumulate on a daily basis. That is at a very basic level. Then there are different kinds of mantras, different kinds of musical invocations that are also specific to different qualities. And that brings in our connection with the deities. So if you have the devatas, say you have Shiva related mantras, or you have Devi related mantras, all of these have very specific kinds of indications for inner well being. And having worked now with different audiences, I'd say people from different backgrounds as well, there's a lot of humility every time I see that, irrespective of what a person's background is, the universality of the mantra is applicable to them. There is some kind of a benefit that they get from it. So on a more physical level, I'd say it definitely helps us to find a greater place of peace. And on a deeper level, it helps us go into experiences which are more transcendental. So they say deeper states of consciousness, where we are able to answer the question, who am I? This is a very large question. And many spiritual paths, many traditional paths have asked this question, who am I and why am I here? Music, and especially mantra recitation, assists with that process of helping us discover ourselves. So I'd say on various levels, it does have a very powerful impact.
Wow. This is something like I'm sure a lot of the audience is also hearing for the first time, that so far, I guess, like the common understanding which people have is music, of course, people feel as a way of relaxing.
Yeah.
But like you mentioned, that even in mantras, there are different types of mantras which can actually do different things which you intend to do. So this is something extremely interesting and extremely, I would say, which could force some of the audience to look a little bit deeper into this subject.
Certainly, certainly. And even, of course, the science of, I'd say, of mantra recitation is very deep. There's a lot of, I would say that it's very important to be initiated into it by a teacher or by somebody who has great knowledge. And now there are so many sources of knowledge also available. Um, and even I would say, the simpler forms of recitation. So we have, recitations on Lord Shiva, we have recitations on Devi, you have recitations on Lord Ganesh. There are actually parts of the physiology that have been identified to have a connection with the specific functions of these deities. So one part of it is faith and belief, and the other part of it is looking at the direct correlation between our physical, mental well being and these forms and symbols that we have inherited through our tradition. And I know there are a lot of wonderful scholars and people who are doing research further into this area, but it's truly fascinating because it's something that we sometimes take for granted. We say, oh, this is just a matter of faith. There's an idol or a picture, and we go and do pranam to it, and that simplicity of that faith is beautiful in its own way. And yet when you go deeper into the study of it, you realize these are profound life energies that, irrespective of where we are interacting with them at all times. So through sound we can actually harness some of that energy. These are very powerful tools that, this is why even they say for children it's very important, especially at younger ages, to have some introduction, some kind of initiation into recitation and chanting, because it can really help in developing concentration, developing focus, being able to weather the storms that life brings. Invariably, we are all um, we've all experienced challenges in life. I think, irrespective of what kind of practices we do. We're all susceptible to being in challenging situations. But the practices, especially the musical practices, can be great ones to come back to. And I remember, just as a little example, growing up, I was taught the Gayatri mantra as when I was very little, and there are so many instances where you feel overcome with fear or with anxiety. And I remember there was a very profound teacher whom our family used to go to. And she was a prolific speaker as well on some of the philosophy. And as a little child, I remember going to her, and especially when I was going through a challenging time. And she said to me at that time, repeat the Gayatri mantra, just keep chanting it, and don't let go of that practice. And I found that um, every time there has been the need to hold on to something as an anchor, the the musical practices like that, for instance, the Gayatri mantra, other kinds of mantras, other kinds of recitations, have been really, really beautiful, in being able to help navigate that, help bring more clarity into the mind. Because ultimately, with that, what we're doing is we're moving our awareness deeper, and so we're coming into contact with who we truly are, and then all the other confusions on the outside tend to melt away when we are connected deeply within. So yes, indeed, there are, I think, many benefits to being initiated into this kind of musical practice.
No, this is extremely fascinating. All the different aspects that you are speaking about, and I'm sure listening to this, a lot of the audience may be getting interested into this, especially the parents, and the way you spoke about children and how much benefit it could potentially hold for those children.
Yeah,
So definitely, what we are going to do is we are going to give the links on all your your public recitations which are there. So
certainly.
here as well, so that people who want to dig a little deeper into it do have access created as well. So
Great.
Mr. Sai, you are also you are also into astrology and a Vedic counselor.
Yes.
So can you speak on how these fields are related to music, which is what we spoke about so far?
Yeah. So, normally when people hear about astrology and music, if you were to ask, is there any connection? They probably um, not really feel like there is a connection between the two. But there's a very interesting place where the two intersect. So, Vedic astrology, as we know it, especially in India, in our society, it's very commonly known as Jyotish. Yeah, and if we look at the meaning of the word Jyotish, it actually means the Lord of Light, and it is the light that we are able to shed upon time. We think about, in Hindu philosophy, time is like a river, it's constantly flowing, and Jyotisha is that light that we're able to shine upon a certain uh, part of time. We're able to look at time and look at what are the gifts that time is bringing to us. And there are many gurus, many masters, many prolific uh, I'd say practitioners who have demonstrated this through their life work, and we take inspiration from their work and teachings as well. But this aspect of looking at time is one of the key aspects of astrology. We all go to an astrologer to say what is going to happen in the future. Um, Now, when we look at music, we look at classical music or the branches that I spoke about, they are referred to as Gandharva Veda. So they are also a branch of the Veda. Jyotisha is actually a limb of the Veda, as many may not be aware of it, but actually it has its origins. It is one of the different limbs of the Veda, literally. So it is. These are all branches of that total knowledge called Veda that we attempt to use in order to know ourselves better, to have a more blissful, enriching experience of life. Now, in classical music, if you look at the importance of time, yeah, um, there are ragas for different times of the day. There are also ragas for different seasons. We always look at the practice in terms of time, and how can we make time more beautiful? How can we interact with time in the best possible way? This is what actually musical Shastriya Sangeet actually teaches us. How can you make the most of a season? In the monsoon season, in the rainy season, we will feel like intrinsically listening to a particular kind of music, perhaps. In the summer season, it will be different. So our bodies and our internal rhythms are naturally tuned to Prakriti, to the rhythms of the seasons. So we look at even the kinds of foods in our culture. They are all tuned uh, to how the seasons function. So if you look back, you get a beautiful connection between how all these branches of knowledge are linked to real life. This is not something written in a book somewhere that we have to dig out. If we just look at creation, we look at nature, we look at our own physiology, we look at our own feelings, and we realize all of this is perfectly in tune with the way that nature operates. So musicality actually allows us to look, especially Shastriya Sangeet, um, and mantra music as well, allows us to look at certain times of the year and bring focus to it through music. In astrology, of course, as everyone will know, that there are certain time periods that we look at which are influenced by certain planets. So the ability to bring beauty into time, to be able to make our time here on this planet, in this life, more enriching, I would say both of them are beautifully connected in that way. And then another part of it relates to, in our culture, there is, as I had alluded to before as well, there is this question of who am I? Seekers throughout time have asked this question, and many have spoken about their answers of this question through musical compositions, through poetry, through the authorship of different texts. But irrespective of what age of time they have come in, they have asked this question, who am I? That is the beauty of our culture. We have not used our knowledge to manipulate the world outside as much as we have actually allowed the individual to remember the inner experience of life. That has been the greatest contribution of Bharatiya Sanskriti to the world. Um, so both of these streams of knowledge ask the question, who am I and how can I make my life more and more enriching? In music, we answer the question of who am I by being connected to the greatest forms of the deities through invocation. When we sing a, when I sing a invocation to Lord Shiva, I feel like I'm actually becoming one with Shiva. There is no difference at that time. In astrology, when we make contact with certain connections in the birth chart of what we are going through, ultimately they connect back to some kind of planetary influence. The planets are also then connected to the deities. The same deities that we sing invocations to, the same ones are connected to the planets. So, for example, Mars or Mangal is connected to Lord Hanuman. So a lot of people may have also, who have been to astrologers, they might receive certain remedies. You perform this puja, or you chant this mantra, or you worship this particular form, because that quality is represented by that form. And we are fortunate in our culture, we have forms that we can actually invoke. So a lot of astrology actually is also about being able to bring this connection with the higher sources of energy into our life. And we find that, imagine, if you can actually sing the mantra yourself instead of asking someone else to do something for you, you actually have the ability to invoke that in your own experience. It becomes a very personal, very beautiful experience. So if someone goes to an astrologer and they say that Ganesh ji ki puja karo, of course, there are certain traditions and ways to do the puja, which there are people who have studied it and practice it beautifully. One must always revere them and acknowledge their contribution. But also on a personal level, if you have a knowledge of the music and the mantras and also the language itself, you can actually do a lot of the practice on your own as well. So in this way, there is a beautiful connect, I'd say, between these two streams of knowledge. In fact, I think they blend together very, very beautifully.
Very nice, very nice. And again, the more I'm speaking to you, the more curious I am becoming about all the different aspects that you are speaking about. So, in this, like one interesting one interesting idea that you mentioned is
Yeah,
like astrology is the study of the different planets in the birth chart, and then through mantras you are you are doing an invocation for the deity who is responsible for that planet in some ways.
yeah,
So on that, like in a lot of cases you ask panditji to do the puja and you are not doing it yourself. So
yeah,
does that mean like will it still have impact, or you should be doing it yourself? Because if that's an energy I am calling for,
yeah,
then shouldn't it be like nearer to me, which means I don't know, like I don't understand the complete
yeah.
science behind it, but intuitively I would think that if I am calling, it should have much higher impact compared to someone else calling it for me.
Absolutely. In fact, there have been a lot of debates, I think, about this question. It's an excellent question, and I think um, both of these aspects have their own place. I feel like the people who have spent their whole life studying this, learning the actual techniques, it is not something which anyone can pick up overnight. So there is a certain importance to their place in society and what they offer in terms of doing the puja absolutely in the right way. There's a certain physical sadhana also required if you want to be able to get the maximum energy out of the mantras, which for everyone is probably not possible. So I would say that that is definitely something which, on behalf of others, they have the ability to be able to make that connection. Yet, what you raise is a very important question, because somewhere I feel over time we have become a little bit lazy in that regard. Because this is one thing I noticed even when I used to attend havans and fire ceremonies and pujas which were organized in homes, just as a youngster, not really conducting it but being part of it. And I noticed that in Hindu society, what happened is we became a little bit disconnected from the practices. So we said, okay, Panditji will come, he'll do everything. Meanwhile, like, children are running around, people are more worried about the food, what is it going to be, all these parts, and there is no cohesion, there is nothing that everyone is doing together as a group. Even when we go to a mandir and we offer puja, it's very unstructured, it's beautiful in its own way, but everyone does it according to what they feel like. Sometimes people will just go, out of maybe a little bit of fear that, oh,
Yeah.
something bad will happen, so I should go. Yet some people will go out of a deep faith. So it's all very different the way everyone approaches. But um, oftentimes I feel like we are not educated enough to be able to also participate. Participation on a physical level is very important. It's not enough to pay for something, to
Hmm.
give money and say, okay, my job is done. And I think that is where a lot of my work also has been, in that area of educating people that there are actually very simple practices, very simple mantras, very simple musical invocations that you can actually learn, which are beautiful to hear. It's not there is this idea also in some sections of society that, oh, devotional music is boring. It's something which only older people do. And I think that entire mindset is changing. And
Hmm.
when there are beautiful ways in which you can use your voice,
Hmm.
even if you're not a trained musician, there are actually very simple practices and mantras that I think everyone who is on this path or who has some interest should definitely take the time to learn. Because what you can do with your own sankalpa is like your intention,
Hmm.
um, it doesn't at all match what somebody else will do on your behalf. So I'd say both are important, definitely. To participate in pujas and to give that our support is very important, but also on an individual level, I think it's so important to be involved. And imagine, when you're in a puja, and or some of the bhajan sandhya sessions that I offer, I always make it a point also to speak about the meaning, the relevance of what it
Hmm.
is that we are going to sing.
Yeah.
That is very important in a modern time, because this
Hmm.
is a time when everyone doesn't understand Sanskrit, everyone doesn't, is not trained in every aspect of the ritual. So we tend to disconnect sometimes and say, chalo,
Correct.
somebody else is doing
Yeah.
it.
Correct.
But little bit of education, little bit of interest,
Hmm.
intention, and it can make the whole experience so much more meaningful. It can be very, very beautiful. In fact, even havans, there are
Hmm.
simple ones that everybody can do in their house without having to do the elaborate thing. Just as and there are certain astrological times when it's more conducive to do that.
Hmm.
So satisfying. In fact, when even the youngsters join in, as a group, when everyone sits together in the family, it is a beautiful way for everyone to come together as well. I think there are many practices like that. So you definitely raise a very important question. I think the inner awareness, the
Hmm.
inner consciousness is ultimately most important to stir with these practices. It is not, we're not doing it ultimately to please someone else. We're
Hmm.
doing it for our own selves. And I think when we understand that, we realize there has to be some level of participation inside.
Correct.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
And one last question now, which I want
yeah,
to ask you is, once we get this, I'm definitely now much more curious to learn more about this subject.
yeah,
But one question which I want to ask is, once we learn more about Vedic astrology, we learn
yes,
more about this science, then
yes,
how does that help us in our day to day life? How does that empower us in our day to day, things that and day to day problems that we face?
right. That's again an excellent question. So, one part of Jyotisha and astrology, Vedic astrology, is to go and consult an actual astrologer, right? That's something we do maybe every few months or when there is a milestone. So, that's one part of it because that person is able to read things out of their own sadhana, their own work, they're able to read it in a certain way. When we have an awareness about the nature of time that we are going through, it is actually very empowering. Because if I know right now that there are certain talents or qualities of mine that are being emphasized by the planetary energies, I can actually pay more attention to them. I can focus on them. Sometimes, for instance, a person's artistic journey shows up a lot in the chart. So it says that you have to focus a little more on that.
Hmm.
And sometimes there are, the universe comes knocking at our door, I'd say. Certain opportunities will come to us. And when we are not always very connected inside, we're overcome by lots of other distractions. We might end up ignoring certain opportunities to develop our own selves, to work in a certain area, to pay more attention to certain talents that might even be ignored. Let's say it's a great time, to write something, to author a book at a certain time. It's good to put the focus onto that. There are other times when it's great to also travel a little bit, for one's work purposes, to take opportunities like that. When we have an understanding of the nature of time, we are more open and embracing of that kind of quality. On the other hand, some people may say that, astrology makes us a little bit fatalistic, and there is nothing that we can do about certain event. That is an approach that I don't at all sort of subscribe to that area, because I don't approach astrology as someone is going to tell me what is going to happen in my life.
Hmm.
I approach it with the idea that the planetary energies are my friends. My every quality that we look at, whether it is the elements, let's say we take the water, we take fire, we take the earth, we take the air, all of these elements are actually reflections of planetary energies.
Hmm.
Mangal is related, Mars is related to fire, Surya, the sun as well, is related to the fire element. Mangal is also related to the earth element. So in our lives, we are constantly interacting with these elements, these qualities. No one can say that, oh, I don't believe in this, so I am not at all affected by the five elements. I don't think anyone can claim that, because the body itself is made up of these. So when I start to look at these planetary energies as the building blocks of my life, then I am willing to accept all the lessons that they have to teach me. And sure, there are difficulties also which come at certain times, but there is never ever an approach which says that you're doomed. There's nothing you can do about it. The nature of life is like that. Life is never a full stop. There are always phases. It's like the phases of the moon. There's bright phases, there are dark phases. So when you understand the nature of a certain time, you become a little more patient. If you feel like, okay, now I need to be a little bit,
Okay.
I just need to
Hmm.
be put in a little bit extra work,
Hmm.
I need to be go into the detail of things a little more. The planetary knowledge can help you in that way, and ultimately, all of this. is trying to point to that same question of who am I beyond form and appearance. That I am the light that shines within as the what is known as the Atma. So I am that brilliant light which cannot be modified, changed, destroyed. I am eternal. I am, as they say, Chidananda Rupaha, Shivoham, Shivoham. And even astrology is helping us live this physical experience in a way that is most enriching. But it always points us to the the path of how can you know your true self better. Yeah? Knowing the true self doesn't mean we don't enjoy this experience of life. We are here interacting with this world. It's beautiful. It's perhaps a miraculous experience that we are even able to have this experience of life. I think sometimes we don't stop and realize how lucky and fortunate we are to be in these in this realm of reality. So how do we make the most of it? How do we make it most enriching? Astrology can assist us with that. And at the same time, I will say there is a tendency to get a little bit obsessed. I've seen also a person will look at it in a very fear-based way, saying that oh, something terrible is going to happen. That approach is actually counterproductive, because when you look at it in that way, you are actually creating blockages in your own awareness. So look at it fearlessly with a brave sense of, yes, I have been brought here into this world, and with courage, with strength, I will face all of the various situations, and I have the support of all of my planetary friends. I have access to all that energy. We're so blessed. We have the ability to invoke them. We have the ability to understand them. We are not helpless uh, victims of the forces of nature. I think that is why in a human birth we are uniquely advantaged, yeah, that we have the ability to understand these forces, to contemplate upon them, and to utilize them for our own growth. So in that way, I would definitely say that there are numerous ways in which this knowledge can help us, and yet one should not get, I would say, caught up in a fear-based approach to it, because that is defeating the entire purpose of why it is there.
No, this is something extremely beautiful that you spoke about, and I've actually heard it for the first time. And but it does make complete sense.
Yeah,
Like you mentioned that these planetary positions and planetary energies, which
yeah,
is what astrology is all about, that's
yeah.
actually pushing us in the direction where I am most where it is most conducive for me to answer this question, who am I
Yes.
now? So in that way, so there is nothing, it's all good. So whatever you see, it is actually good and pushing you in that direction, which is what you do want to know. So
Absolutely, absolutely. We tend to classify things as so we have this good and bad classification that we have. So we think that in life we only want good experiences, we want pleasant experiences, and everything else is bad and which should be ignored. But if you look around at nature, you're constantly having it's a constantly fluctuating and moving reality. You have creation, you have dissolution. There is no moralistic quality attributed to it. Prakriti is devoid of morals in that way. It is purely just uh, various qualities which are there is the gunas, which are called sattva, rajas, and tamas. They are constantly interacting in different ways and creating different realities. It is our minds that end up deciding, okay, this is what we want to be attracted to, this is what we want to avoid. And we are blessed with the intellect to be able to decipher and to discern. And yet at the end of it, just like you said, all of it is ultimately part of the one whole. And when we embrace that, we realize we're actually not separate from anything. The same self that is inside of me is in the creature that is that appears to be um, outside of me, the animals, the birds, the plants. I am that same spark of light which is inside of me is resplendent in them as well. So it can actually, I think, help a person feel a lot more connected to the universe, rather than feel like oh, I'm a victim of circumstances and everything is conspiring against me. I think uh, modern society tends to sometimes make us believe that that you're a good for nothing, and you have to prove yourself as being the greatest in a certain area. Only then you're worthy of attention, worthy of importance. And yet the ancient approaches were so different. Every person right from a young age was made to ask this question, who am I? And they would be taught this mantra, soham, which means that I am that. And that reality then is meant to be contemplated upon, regardless of who the person is. The person was never told you are nothing, you are worthless. And yet sometimes the inner record that we play, we have so much self judgment because we are usually comparing ourselves to others a lot, especially with the way that media grows as well. It makes this tendency more something that we are prone to more. Oh, that person is doing so much, what about me? It's a very natural thing. And the practices then help us remember that I am that, I am that. I am bliss consciousness. So experience that, know that. And nobody else on the outside is going to be able to convince you of that. It is something only you have this unique opportunity through this life, through this awareness, through this intelligence to experience it. Why would we not experience something that we have free access to? It's not even something that you have to earn in some way. Yeah, so these are, I think, very profound truths, but they are also, I think, very relevant and simple and applicable to make our lives much, much more enriched and meaningful.
No, actually, you have spoken about so many things today that is making me, and I'm sure that is making the audience very curious. And you have, like, in such simple words, given that reality is such a beautiful thing that as a person I want to experience it. What is it that you're talking about? What is it that and I'm sure a lot of the audience also feels the same way. One last thing which I want to
Yes.
just say: we are at the end of this session.
Yes.
uh, let's say in our audience you want them to remember just one thing out of this entire session. What would be that last 1 minute of guidance that you would like to give them? What is that last, one most important thing of this entire session which you want them to remember throughout?
Certainly. Well, I would say that to remember that all of the intelligence of the universe is inside of yourself, inside of myself, inside of each one of us. To know and to remember that each one has access to that, what is called creative intelligence. To be able to access that, to study that, to bring that quality out into your life. Always remember everything is inside the individual, and that teaching itself, I think, has guided me on these paths. And even the learning of a certain kind of tool, say a musical tool, or even we have Indian classical dance forms. There are so many different art forms that help an individual to connect to their highest potential. And I would encourage um, those who are listening to, if you have an inclination to learn more, if you have an inclination to practice more, please make the best use of time. It is truly a gift to use that wisely. Yeah.
Very nice.
And
Thank you
if you
so much.
like, my pleasure. If you like, I can actually sing a shloka. We can end with a
Yes,
Devi
please,
Shloka,
please. Yes, please.
since we are in the midst of Navaratri in any case. So just two melodious Devi Shlokas from the Durga, one of the Durga stotrams, and we can close with that. So just requesting everyone to close your eyes and feel like you are seated comfortably, and just bring the awareness in a very gentle way to your breath. As you bring the awareness to your breath, you will automatically start to feel like it begins to slow down. You will start to become aware of a certain kind of peace, a kind of calm that descends upon you. Just be aware of this experience. I will now recite the Devi Shlokas, and as you listen, bring the awareness to the center of your heart. Visualize at the center of your heart that there is a beautiful lotus that is waiting to bloom. And as the chant is recited, visualize that lotus blooming into 1,000-petal lotus, the beautiful light at the center of your heart. Visualize a form of Devi seated in that lotus. Become aware of the presence of Devi inside of your own being. या देवी सर्वभूतेषु दयारूपेण संस्थिता नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः या देवी सर्वभूतेषु शान्तिरूपेण संस्थिता नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति
Very nice.
Thank you so much. Thank you once again for having me on this program, Priyanka, and also for your very insightful questions and also for the very kind introduction that you gave at the beginning. Truly, truly appreciated, and wishing you all the very best as well for the noble work that all of you are doing to spread the message of well-being, which is so important and crucial, I think, in our world today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Priyanka.
Thank you.